March 4, 1973. About 300 meters from the Galápagos Islands. Maurice and Marilyn Bailey were jolted awake by a thunderous crash. Their 31-foot yacht had just collided with a massive sperm whale. Water came rushing through the damaged hull. Within minutes, everything's their home, their possessions. Their dream voyage to New Zealand was disappearing beneath the waves. The British couple scrambled into a tiny 9-foot inflatable raft, grabbing whatever they could as their yacht sank into the vast Pacific. They had no radio, no emergency beacon, no way to call for help. Just an inflatable raft that was never designed for long-term survival at sea. What happened next became one of the most extraordinary survival stories in maritime history. 117 days adrift on the open ocean, where the real test wasn't just staying alive, but keeping their humanity intact through unimaginable hardship. Who were Maurice and Marilyn Bailey? Maurice and Marilyn Bailey were just an ordinary couple from Derby, England, with an extraordinary dream. Like a lot of people in the early 1970s, they craved adventure and a simpler life away from conventional society's constraints. Maurice was a civil engineer. Marilyn was a secretary. They weren't lifelong sailors, but they shared a passion for the sea that grew through weekend sailing trips and coastal voyages. Over time, this hobby evolved into something bigger, planned to sail around the world and eventually settle in New Zealand. For 4 years, they prepared meticulously for their grand adventure. They sold their house and most of their possessions, pouring everything into a 31-foot sailing sloop they named Orland. The boat was sturdy and seaworthy, though modest by today's standards. It had no electronic navigation equipment, only traditional tools, like a sextant, compass, and paper charts. This wasn't unusual for the time. The early 1970s was kind of the tail end of traditional sailing, and the beginning of modern maritime safety. Emergency position, indicating radio beacons, EPIRBs. Now, standard equipment on ocean-going vessels weren't widely available yet. If something went wrong in remote waters, sailors were pretty much on their own. By 1972, the Baileys were ready. They set sail from England, making their way down the European coast, across to the Caribbean, and through the Panama Canal. Each successful leg of the journey boosted their confidence. They weren't reckless thrill-seekers. They were cautious, methodical sailors who respected the sea's power. After navigating the Panama Canal, a significant achievement for amateur sailors, they set course for the Galápagos Islands, their next planned stopover, before the long Pacific crossing to the Marquesas Islands and eventually New Zealand. The waters west of Panama were known for diverse marine life, including massive sperm whales that could reach lengths of over 50 feet and weigh up to 45 tons. These giants typically avoid boats, but in the vastness of the ocean, chance encounters were always possible, especially at dawn or dusk when visibility was limited. On March 4, 1973, approximately 300 miles from the Galápagos Islands, the Baileys' journey would take a catastrophic turn, testing not just their sailing skills, but their very will to survive. The collision came without warning. Maurice and Marilyn were jolted awake by a tremendous impact as a sperm whale struck their yacht. Whether the whale was breaching, feeding, or simply unaware of the boat remains unknown, but the result was catastrophic: a breach in the hull that would soon send Orland to the bottom of the Pacific. As water poured in, the Baileys acted with remarkable clarity. Despite the shock, they had only minutes to make life or death decisions. Their inflatable life raft was designed for emergency use, a temporary refuge until rescue arrived. But in the remote Pacific, rescue could be days or even weeks away. They launched the 9-foot inflatable raft, along with a small dinghy they'd use for additional storage. Working frantically, they salvaged what they could: emergency rations, a few gallons of water, navigational tools, a knife, fishing line, and safety pins. They grabbed logbooks and charts, knowing these would be essential for determining their position. Each item they saved represented a lifeline in the ordeal ahead. As they watched their yacht disappear beneath the waves, the full gravity of their situation became clear. They were adrift in one of the most remote regions of the Pacific Ocean, hundreds of miles from the nearest land, in a craft never intended for long-term survival at sea. Immediate challenges were numerous and daunting. The life raft itself was vulnerably thin rubber membrane between them and the ocean depths. It required constant maintenance, including regular inflation and bailing out water that splashed in. The tropical sun threatened to deteriorate the rubber, while any sharp object could puncture their fragile sanctuary. Space was extremely limited. The 9-foot diameter raft forced them to live in constant physical contact, with barely enough room to stretch out. This confinement would test not just their physical endurance, but their relationship as well. Exposure to the elements was immediate and relentless. The Pacific sun beat down mercilessly during the day, causing severe sunburn and dehydration. At night, temperatures dropped, and they shivered in wet clothes as ocean spray continually soaked them. Their water supply would last only days at minimal rations. Though they'd salvaged some emergency water, it was nowhere near enough for an extended period. Dehydration would quickly become life-threatening without a reliable method to collect rainwater. Food presented another immediate concern. Their emergency rations were limited to some biscuits, chocolate, and a few canned items. These would provide short-term sustenance, but long-term survival would require finding food from the ocean itself. Perhaps most daunting was their isolation. No one knew of their predicament. In 1973, without satellite communications or emergency beacons, they had no way to alert authorities. Their only hope for rescue was to be spotted by a passing ship, an unlikely prospect given the vastness of the Pacific and their tiny profile on the water. The Baileys established immediate priorities: rationing water to the barest minimum, protecting themselves from the sun, maintaining the integrity of the raft, and beginning to supplement their food supplies as soon as possible. The first week adrift demonstrated both their resourcefulness and the severity of their situation. They created a makeshift shelter, using the raft's canopy to shield themselves from the sun. They established strict water rationing, just a few sips per day. They began fishing using improvised hooks made from safety pins, though initially with limited success. As their first week at sea came to an end, they faced a sobering reality. Their emergency supplies were dwindling, no ships had been sighted, and they were at the mercy of ocean currents pushing them further from shipping lanes. What had begun as an emergency was evolving into something far more dire, long-term survival situation that would require extraordinary measures and mental fortitude, adapting to survive. As days turned to weeks, the Baileys' survival challenges intensified. Their emergency rations dwindled to nothing, forcing them to rely entirely on what they could harvest from the ocean. Their initial fishing efforts with safety pins bent into hooks had yielded only occasional small fish, not enough to sustain them. Necessity drove innovation. They discovered that larger sea creatures, particularly turtles, would occasionally approach their raft, curious about this strange object floating on the surface. Through trial and error, they developed techniques to capture these animals. When a turtle came close enough, they'd grab it and haul it aboard their tiny craft. This was physically demanding work, especially as their strength diminished, but essential for survival. Their method for processing these catches was grimly practical. Using a small knife, they'd butcher the animals and consume the meat raw. Cooking was impossible on the inflatable raft. Most challenging was their first time drinking turtle blood to supplement their water supply. This survival technique, while distasteful, provided crucial hydration when rainwater was scarce. "You have to overcome a mental barrier the first time," Maurice would later write. "After that, it becomes simply what you must do to stay alive." Water remained their most critical concern. They dismantled parts of the raft's canopy to create catchment areas for rain. When storms passed over, they'd work frantically to collect every drop, sometimes just licking moisture from the rubber surfaces of the raft. They stored rainwater in every available container, treating it as more precious than gold. Physical deterioration, the physical toll of their ordeal became increasingly apparent. Their skin burned and blistered from constant sun exposure, then cracked from the salt water. Salt sores developed painful ulcers caused by perpetual dampness and salt exposure. Their bodies began consuming muscle mass as caloric intake failed to meet even basic metabolic needs. Weight loss was dramatic and concerning. Both Maurice and Marilyn became increasingly gaunt, their clothes hanging loose on their frames. By the end of their first month adrift, they'd each lost significant weight, with Maurice later estimating he'd lost more than 40 pounds during the ordeal. Their tiny raft required constant maintenance as conditions deteriorated. The harsh sun weakened the rubber material, requiring regular inspection for developing leaks. They had to constantly bail water from the floor of the raft, a task that consumed precious energy. The dinghy they'd salvaged served as vital additional storage, allowing them to distribute weight and supplies. Ocean swells presented constant danger. What might appear as moderate waves from a ship's deck became towering walls of water from the perspective of their low-lying raft. During storms, these swells threatened to capsize them or swamp their fragile craft. They developed techniques to ride out these conditions, positioning the raft to take waves at the safest angle. Psychological battle. As their second month adrift began, the psychological challenges became as formidable as the physical ones. The vastness of the ocean, the uncertainty of rescue, and the daily struggle for survival tested their mental resilience to its limits. They established routines to maintain sanity and purpose, designated times for maintenance tasks, for fishing, for scanning the horizon, for ships. They talked about their hopes for the future, reminisced about the past, and sometimes simply sat in companionable silence, conserving energy. Their relationship dynamics shifted to meet their circumstances. Maurice's engineering mindset provided practical solutions to immediate problems. Marilyn's optimism sustained them through moments of despair. They learned when to push each other and when to provide comfort, developing a partnership perfectly adapted to their extreme circumstances. The ocean itself became both adversary and provider. Sharks occasionally circled their raft, attracted by blood from their catches, or perhaps curious about this unusual object in their territory. Seabirds sometimes landed on the raft, providing rare opportunities to capture additional food. Passing storms brought precious rainwater, but also dangerous conditions that threatened to overwhelm their tiny craft. By day 60 of their ordeal, the Baileys had drifted over 1,000 miles from the site of their shipwreck, carried by ocean currents and trade winds. Their bodies had adapted somewhat to their limited diet and harsh conditions, but the long-term effects of malnutrition were becoming increasingly concerning. Their minds, however, remained sharp and determined, testament to their extraordinary psychological resilience. Glimpses of hope as the days extended into a third month. They spotted several ships on the distant horizon, each representing potential salvation. They signaled frantically with their small mirror, trying to catch the sun's reflection to attract attention. Yet each vessel passed without deviation, likely never seeing the tiny raft bobbing in the vast Pacific expanse. Each missed opportunity tested their resolve, but remarkably, they maintained hope. "We never allowed ourselves to give in to despair," Maurice would later write. "If we did, we knew we wouldn't survive." The storm around day 80 of their ordeal. The Baileys faced their most harrowing challenge when a massive storm system engulfed their tiny raft. For 3 days, towering waves repeatedly washed over them, threatening to capsize their fragile craft or tear it apart. Rain fell in blinding sheets, making it impossible to see more than a few feet. Thunder crashed overhead, and lightning illuminated the churning sea around them. The physical toll was immense. Constantly drenched, fighting to keep the raft properly positioned against the waves. They worked in shifts to bail water. Their hands developed painful cracks and sores from constant exposure to salt water. Exhaustion settled deep in their bones, yet they couldn't rest for fear of being swamped. The storm eventually passed, but it left their situation more precarious than ever. The raft had sustained damage, developing slow leaks that required constant attention. Their already limited supplies had been partially contaminated by seawater, and their physical condition had deteriorated significantly. Both were now severely emaciated, their bodies consuming themselves to provide basic energy. The psychological impact was perhaps even more severe, having survived over 2 months at sea, enduring countless hardships with remarkable resilience. This storm had pushed them to their absolute limits. For the first time, Maurice admitted later, he began to seriously question whether they would survive. Critical water shortage. Their water situation became critical in the weeks that followed. An unusual dry spell meant no rainfall for nearly 2 weeks. Their stored supplies dwindled to almost nothing, forcing them to rely even more heavily on turtle blood for hydroxenosaurs. That was itself becoming scarce, as their weakness made catching turtles increasingly difficult. Dehydration symptoms intensified: cracked lips, dizziness, decreased urination, mental confusion. They rationed their remaining water to mere sips per day, just enough to keep their organs functioning. They tried to avoid speaking to conserve moisture, and spent much of the day lying motionless under their makeshift sunshade. Their physical deterioration reached alarming levels. Both had lost over 1/3 of their body weight. Maurice's once robust frame had become skeletal, while Marilyn's strength had diminished to the point where simple tasks, like helping to bail water, became monumentally difficult. Their skin hung loosely on their frames, and muscle wastage was evident in their limbs. Another ship passes around, day 100. Another ship passed within visible distance, close enough that they could make out figures on the deck. They signaled desperately with their mirror, waved their makeshift flag, and even tried to ignite one of their few remaining flares. But despite their frantic efforts, the ship maintained its course, never deviating. As it disappeared over the horizon, they faced perhaps their darkest emotional moment. "That was the closest we came to giving up," Maurice later wrote, "watching our salvation sail away, not knowing if we'd ever get another chance." What followed was a profound conversation between the couple, one that Maurice would later describe as the most important of their ordeal. They acknowledged their diminishing chances, the reality of their physical deterioration, and the possibility that they might not survive. But rather than surrendering to despair, they made a pact to continue fighting until the very end. "We decided that if we were going to die, we would die trying to live," Marilyn recalled. "We would not simply lie down and accept it." This recommitment to survival came with practical measures. They redistributed tasks based on their remaining strengths. They established a stricter regimen for raft maintenance. They developed new techniques for fishing, using their dwindling energy more efficiently. Their bodies continued to deteriorate, but their resolve strengthened. By this point, they'd drifted over 1,500 miles from where their yacht had sunk. Ocean currents had carried them in a generally westward direction. Though without precise navigational tools, they could only estimate their position. As they approached their 4th month adrift, the likelihood of rescue seemed to diminish with each passing day. They'd seen no ships for weeks. Their ability to catch food was increasingly compromised by their weakness. The raft itself was showing signs of catastrophic failure, with patches barely holding against developing tiers. Yet through it all, they maintained not just their will to survive, but their essential humanity. They continued to support each other emotionally. They shared memories and dreams. They even found moments of beauty in their circumstances, spectacular sunsets, the phosphorescent glow of the ocean at night, the graceful flight of seabirds. This was perhaps their greatest achievement, not just staying alive, but remaining recognizably themselves, despite circumstances that threatened to reduce them to mere survival machines. Their relationship, tested beyond anything they could have imagined, hadn't broken, but strengthened through shared hardship. As day 117 dawned, they had no way of knowing that their extraordinary ordeal was about to reach its conclusion. Rescue on June 30, 1973. After 117 days adrift in the Pacific Ocean, a Korean fishing vessel named Wielmi 306 was operating approximately 1,500 miles from where the Bailey's yacht had sunk. A crew member on watch duty noticed something unusual on the horizon, a small object that didn't match the normal patterns of ocean debris. Captain Su Chong ordered his vessel to investigate. As they drew closer, there was initial confusion about what they were seeing. The object was clearly man-made, but the figures on it barely resembled humans. Later, Captain Su would recall his shock at realizing these emaciated figures were living people. "At first we thought they might be corpses," he reported. "They were so thin, so weathered by the sun. It was only when they began waving weakly that we understood they were alive." The Baileys had spotted the fishing vessel when it was still distant. Another ship on the horizon, like the many others that had passed them by. They'd gone through their now familiar routine, signaling with their mirror, waving their makeshift flag. But this time, something extraordinary happened. The ship changed course, heading directly toward them. "We didn't dare believe it at first," Maurice later wrote. "We'd been disappointed too many times. But when it kept coming closer, I turned to Marilyn and said, 'I think this is it. I think we're going to be rescued.'" The crew of the Wielmi 36 launched a small boat to reach the Baileys. The fishermen were visibly shocked by the couple's condition. Both Maurice and Marilyn were severely emaciated, their skin burned almost black by sun exposure, covered in salt sores, and so weak they could barely stand. The rescue itself presented challenges. The Baileys had been confined to their small raft for so long that their muscles had atrophied. They needed substantial assistance to board the fishing vessel. Once aboard, their condition required immediate attention. The Korean crew, though lacking medical training, did everything they could to help. They provided water, carefully rationed at first to prevent shock to the Bailey's systems. They offered rice, porridge, and other gentle foods that wouldn't overwhelm digestive systems unaccustomed to regular meals. Communication was difficult due to language barriers, but through gestures and the few English words known by some crew members, the Baileys were able to convey their story. The Korean captain made the decision to divert to Honolulu, Hawaii, the nearest major port with advanced medical facilities. Journey to recovery. The journey to Honolulu took several days, during which the Baileys began the first stages of recovery. They were able to clean themselves, change into borrowed clothes, and begin carefully reintroducing normal food, but their medical condition remained serious. Both were severely malnourished. Maurice had developed a dangerous infection in his leg, and both exhibited symptoms of organ stress from prolonged dehydration. When the Wielmi 36 arrived in Honolulu on July 7, 1973, the Baileys were immediately transferred to hospital care. Medical staff were astonished by their condition and their survival story. Maurice had lost approximately 40 pounds from his original weight, while Marilyn had lost about 30 pounds. They required extensive treatment for malnutrition, exposure, and various infections. News of their rescues spread quickly, having survived 117 days, adrift one of the longest known survival situations on a life raft. Baileys became an international sensation. Journalists gathered at the hospital, eager to hear their remarkable story. Maritime experts were astonished by the length of their survival and the techniques they'd employed. For Maurice and Marilyn, the sudden transition from fighting for survival to becoming media figures was disorienting. They were still in the early stages of physical recovery, still processing the psychological impact of their ordeal, but they also recognized the public's fascination with their story and the opportunity to share what they'd learned. "We didn't set out to break records," or become famous, Marilyn told reporters from her hospital bed. "We simply refuse to die out there." Their rescue marked the end of an extraordinary chapter in maritime survival history, 117 days during which an ordinary couple had faced the full force of nature and emerged alive through a combination of practical skills, psychological resilience, and unwavering mutual support. Recovery and reflection. The Baileys' physical recovery took months. Hospital staff in Honolulu treated their multiple medical issues: severe malnutrition, muscle atrophy, infections, and the cumulative effects of prolonged exposure to sun and salt water. Their bodies had been pushed to the absolute limits of human endurance, and the return to health was neither quick nor easy. Psychological recovery presented its own challenges. After months of existing in survival mode, focusing entirely on immediate needs and threats, adjusting to normal life required significant recalibration. They experienced what would now be recognized as symptoms of post-traumatic stress: nightmares about being adrift, startled reactions to loud noises, and occasional disorientation in comfortable surroundings that had once been familiar. Yet remarkably, their ordeals seemed to have strengthened rather than damaged their relationship. The intense dependency they'd developed on each other during those 117 days created a bond that few couples ever experience. They'd seen each other at their absolute worst, physically deteriorated, emotionally vulnerable, occasionally despairing, and had provided the support necessary for mutual survival. "There are no secrets between us anymore," Maurice commented in an interview shortly after their rescue. "No pretenses. When you've fought for survival together, everyday disagreements seem trivial by comparison." Documenting their story. While still recovering in Hawaii, the Baileys began documenting their experience. Their logbooks and journals, salvaged from their sinking yacht and maintained throughout their ordeal, provided a detailed chronology of their 117 days adrift. These first-hand accounts would form the basis of their book, eventually published under the title 117 Days Adrift. The book, released in 1974, became an immediate success. It offered not just a gripping survival story but practical insights into maritime survival techniques, psychological resilience, and the dynamics of relationships under extreme stress. Written in straightforward prose that reflected the Baileys' pragmatic approach to their ordeal, it found an audience among sailors, adventure enthusiasts, and the general public alike. What distinguished their story from many other survival accounts was the relationship dynamic. Most famous survival stories feature individuals alone against the elements, but the Baileys demonstrated how partnership can be both a complication and a crucial advantage in life-threatening situations. Perhaps surprisingly, given their near-death experience, the Baileys didn't abandon their love of sailing. After fully recovering, they eventually returned to the sea, though with additional safety precautions, informed by their ordeal. Their continued sailing demonstrated extraordinary resilience, refusal to allow even the most traumatic experience to rob them of something they loved. Legacy. Their story became a case study in survival training programs. Maritime academies and sailing schools incorporated aspects of their experience into safety curricula. Their specific techniques, from catching turtles to water conservation methods, provided practical examples of effective survival strategies. The psychological aspects of their survival garnered particular attention from experts. Their ability to maintain hope despite seemingly hopeless circumstances demonstrated the crucial role of mental attitude in survival situations. Their mutual support system, how they balanced each other's strengths and weaknesses, provided encouragement during low moments, and maintained a sense of purpose, offered lessons applicable beyond survival scenarios. Survival experts have particularly noted how the Baileys maintained discipline and routine throughout their ordeal. From regular raft maintenance to specific times for fishing attempts, they created structure in a situation that could easily have descended into chaos. This organization likely contributed significantly to their survival. preventing the kind of fatalism that has claimed the lives of many castaways. In the decades following their rescue, their story continued to resonate. Sophie Elmhurst's comprehensive 2024 biography, Maurice and Marilyn, an extraordinary true story of shipwreck, survival and love, brought renewed attention to their ordeal, placing it in the broader context of their lives and relationship. Winning the prestigious Nero Gold Prize, the book cemented the Baileys' place in the pantheon of remarkable survival stories. Maritime safety developments in the years after their ordeal, particularly the development and widespread adoption of emergency position indicating radio beacons, EPIRBs, would have dramatically altered their experience had they been available in 1973. Modern sailors in similar situations would likely be rescued within days rather than drifting for months. The Bailey story thus stands as both an extraordinary human achievement and a reminder of how technological advances have changed the nature of maritime safety. When compared to other famous sea survival cases, such as Stephen Callahan's 76 Days Adrift or Jose Salvador Alvarenga's astonishing 438 days, the Baileys' experience stands out for its partnership dynamic. Survival experts note that while solo survivors face certain advantages, such as managing limited resources for just one person, the psychological support of companionship can be a crucial factor in maintaining the will to live through prolonged ordeals. Final thoughts beyond the practical aspects of their survival. The Bailey story serves as a powerful metaphor for human resilience and relationship. As Sophie Elmhurst wrote in her biography, their survival was not just a physical feat, but a lesson in how love, quiet determination, and shared hardship can hold people together when everything else falls apart. In their own reflections, years after the event, the Baileys maintained that while they would never have chosen to experience such an ordeal, they recognized how it had shaped them and their understanding of what truly matters in life. Out there on the ocean, Maurice once reflected, everything is stripped away except what's essential. You learn quickly what you truly need to survive, not just physically, but as a human being, and it's far less than you might think. Thank you for joining me for this extraordinary journey through one of history's most remarkable maritime survival stories. The Baileys' 117 Days Adrift in the Pacific Ocean remains a testament to human resilience, ingenuity, and the power of partnership in the face of seemingly impossible odds. What strikes me most about their story isn't just the physical feat of surviving nearly 4 months on an inflatable raft, but the psychological strength they demonstrated. As Maurice wrote, "We never allowed ourselves to give in to despair. If we did, we knew we wouldn't survive." That simple, yet profound insight applies not just to survival situations, but to many of life's challenges. If you found the Bailey story as fascinating as I did, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel reach more people who appreciate these remarkable, true survival stories. And if you're interested in more extraordinary survival stories like this one, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.